And what I mean by different context, instead of the end of the retreat being a cause for silent, festive attitude where, yes, it's done, versus I've learned some things I can take with me and to enrich my life and to make myself be less prone to injuring myself. We injure ourselves the most. We know the secret buttons, the destructive attitudes with which we harm ourselves. And as we harm ourselves, we also harm others. The Dhamma is not a series of things, new data, new information that we can add on to the libraries of knowledge that we have accumulated over a lifetime, but especially to help us to see with better eyes, to identify where we were getting things wrong. A few times you've heard me on this retreat and in others, those of you who have attended those as well, that the cornerstone of the Dhamma, the Buddha's teaching, is sati. You can practice sati anywhere. Mindfulness of what? Today we elaborated on the 6 senses and how crucial it is for us to identify that these 6 sense doors that keep connecting us to the world, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, the mind, which processes all that information, all the mental signatures that we add on to things, the layer, the lenses with which we see, we interpret life. Without sati, they will simply ruin us. Without sati, we will not see the mirage, the movie that is taking place, and we are fooling ourselves into thinking that there isn't, in fact, a movie going on, which I call my life. This is my life. This is my situation, my relationships, my problems. And when there's a mine, then there's also you, your problems. In fact, you are a problem. That's what we say. We look at the body, we have the same attitude. We look at someone else, we have the same attitude. What we are simply doing is looking through wrong view. That's the lens, wrong view, which Lord Buddha calls micchaditti. Those are the kileshas, those are the defilements that cover up reality as it's taking place. The same person that you cannot stand, the same problem that now you cannot stand, the situation similarly. Had the conditions been different, you would look at that person, that thing, that situation in a totally different way. Totally, completely different way. So the consciousnesses that one after the other play out give us the semblance, the appearance that it is one. It's like the movie I was telling you about earlier. Every single second has 24 frames. Any stretch of film. Similarly with us. Every second there's countless series of consciousnesses playing, one after another, after another, after another. Always. Which we end up calling me. Mindfulness is going to allow us to dissect with the scalpel of wisdom each of these frames. You'll be able to see, wait a minute, there's a disconnect. It just looks like it's a one stream of consciousness. It's just a one stream, which I call life, my life, my life. And that's the problem, where we have to drag yesterday to today. When you wake up, you're not thinking about today being fresh. How many of us do think about life when you first wake up? Oh my, it's a fresh day. How many of us do that? No, we're too busy capturing the memory from yesterday. Okay, where did I leave off? What was that? Oh yes, I was miserable. It happens so fast. I'm saying it in a grotesque manner or making it too, but this is a fact. We have to link up the consciousnesses so that they can appear that there are one. But they aren't. They aren't. Series of consciousnesses. The eyes are picking up something, but they cannot be dominant all the time. Soon enough, your attention will shift, and now your focus is on what you're hearing. It could be so fast. And then suddenly you're aware of your sit bones. You're sitting on a chair. And then there's a bird. Oop. Ear consciousness comes in. And then Bhante moves his fingers. Guess what? Eyes catch that. Eye consciousness. This is happening so quickly. And this is one of the primary reasons why we are deluded. Because no one's coming over to turn on the lights in the movie theater. We have to turn our own light. This is our movie theater. And the light, the light switch, is you becoming mindful, which Lord Buddha talks about as sati sampajanya, clearly understanding what's taking place, thanks to you being mindful in the first place. Otherwise, we are simply living like zombies and attaching ourselves in today with the yesterdays. Yesterdays. Yesterday was the today of another day. But we are just linking ourselves up to the past. And that's how we give ourselves a sense of identity. So some things to think about. Hopefully to be mindful of rather than think about, because we already have a lot to think about. It's just a baggage of concepts, most of which are things that we do not utilize nor carefully observe. So today I would like us to cover a sutta for this retreat's last day, and it is a lovely sutta. It's a relatable story of a bhikkhu who is not doing so well, and we see what happens with Lord Buddha being involved in that scene, and it is the Phagguṇa Sutta. Phagguṇa is the name of the Venerable One, the Venerable. Phagguṇa Sutta, this one is from the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses. It is from the book of the sixes, so 6.56, Sutta number 56, from the numerical discourses. So when we are talking about the book of the sixes, so because it's from the book of the sixes, usually that means that there's going to be 6 different categorizations that Lord Buddha is going to enumerate. Let's say one after another, he's going to say this point, that point, this point. So in total, it will be 6. Like yesterday, when we covered the Phagguṇa Sutta on sexual lust, Lord Buddha talked about 7 because it was from the book of the seventh, 7.50. So over 45 years of teaching, Lord Buddha had talked about, well, that's why we say 84,000 teachings. There's so many suttas, and the compilers of the canon, the Pali canon, they arranged very meticulously, carefully, these suttas into these different categories. And then they named it Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, because of the numbers that Lord Buddha used. So it starts from Book of the Ones. So in it, you're going to see things that Lord Buddha says, there's one of this, there's one of this. Like yesterday, I was mentioning how in regard to sensuality, he says, there's nothing like a woman who attracts, there's one thing that attracts a man, nothing attracts a man as much as a woman does. The smell, there's one thing. The sight, there's one thing. The smell, the sight, the sound, etc., etc. Similarly for the opposite. So then you have twos, Book of the Twos. There's two of this. And then he enumerates. And you have so many chapters dedicated to the twos. Yesterday, a sister was asking about Hiri and Ottappa. Two. Hiri, wise moral shame, and wise moral fear. So that would fall under the Book of the Tusa, etc., all the way to the Book of the 11s. So the Anguttara Nikaya is a vast volume, which, by the way, I'm translating, and I got to Book of the Sevens. So I still have a little bit of Book of the Sevens to translate, and then 8, 9, 10, 11. Hopefully I'll finish before I croak. So, Anguttara Nikaya 6.56, Phagguṇa Sutta, with the Venerable Phagguṇa. At one time, the Venerable Phagguṇa was gravely ill, and the Venerable Ananda, by approaching the Blessed One, paid homage to him and then sat to one side and said, Bhante, the Venerable Phagguṇa is gravely ill. It would be helpful if the Blessed One would go to him out of compassion. The Blessed One accepted the suggestion in silence. Usually that's how it went. Like, you don't see Lord Buddha saying, all right, okay, sure. There's usually silence. And in his silence, he consents. Every single gesture that Lord Buddha made, he always thought about the before and after and during. Meaning, how will this be interpreted by people in the future? He was the embodiment of everything kusala. That's why we all have to use Lord Buddha as our teacher, not some other teacher. Despite the fact that we might respect this bhikkhu or that as one's teacher, but our main teacher is Lord Buddha, period. Because there's so much he could teach us, even from the way he responds to a request. And Venerable Ananda was known as the liaison between lay people and the Sangha, especially Lord Buddha. For that and other reasons, he's always respected in all traditions, I would say. Then, when it was evening, the Blessed One, having come out of his seclusion, went to see the Venerable Phagguṇa. On seeing the Blessed One approaching from the distance, the Venerable Phagguṇa quickly tried to get out of bed to pay his respects to the Lord. But the Blessed One urged him, Phagguṇa, it is not necessary. What a teacher. What kindness. Do not move out from your bed, he says. There are seats prepared here in front. I will sit there. I will sit there. This is Lord Buddha, the king of the Dhamma. Look at the humanity. We can learn so much. So much. Because he was a senior, he was Lord Buddha, so obviously he would have to sit and you get up. And even as a senior bhikkhu, you get up out of respect in his hands. But he's sick, he's barely able to move. But he's trying to get up to show respect. Bhante, I've been in situations where people still adhere to rites and rituals. Well, the bhikkhu has to sit at the highest point. And depending on who has the seniority among bhikkhus, so if there's another bhikkhu who's of a lesser vassas or pansas, then that bhikkhu has to sit at a lower point. All these nonsensical rites and rituals have lost their meaning if we lose the humanity That's what we have. We have a lot of rites and ritual nonsense. Nonsense only because they sacrifice the human element. And here we see these tiny little gestures, so much being told to us of the aliveness of that moment, of the humanity of Lord Buddha. So he says, it's not necessary. Stay in your bed. And the Blessed One sat on the prepared seat and said to the Venerable Phagguṇa, Phagguṇa, I hope your situation is bearable. I hope you are doing well. Is your pain decreasing and not intensifying? Can you tell if the pain is nearing its end, or is it still strong and persisting? This is the way you see in many suttas where you have one person being sick, and the visiting bhikkhu, usually bhikkhus or Lord Buddha, like in this case, would ask, is the pain intensifying or decreasing? To know, and to also tell us what state he is in, this person, the sick one. Bhante, my situation is unbearable, and I am not doing well at all. My pain is increasing and intensifying. The pain is not nearing its end, as it is still strong and persisting. Bhante, the pain I am experiencing is so severe that it feels just as if a strong man was cleaving the top of my head with the edge of a sharp sword. In the same way, Bhante, my head feels like it is being sliced by the dry and violent internal winds. Bhante, I can't bear the pain. In those days, when, they didn't know much about the sicknesses unless there was a doctor involved, a physician. And oftentimes they would just use the vayu or the vata, or in this case, the winds, the internal winds, as description of what it feels like. There's dryness, there's heaviness, there's like tearing of something. It's like, I have a piercing headache. See, piercing. We have adjectives to describe, even today. People used to have headaches even then, just like us. Bhante, my situation is unbearable. I am not doing well at all. My pain is increasing and intensifying. The pain is not nearing its end, as it is still strong and persisting. Bhante, the pain I am experiencing is so severe that it feels just as if a strong man was continuously tightening a leather strap that is wrapped around my head. In the same way, Bhante, my head feels like it is about to explode by the dry and violent internal winds. Bhante, I can't bear the pain. One of the tortures that people would do over centuries in different cultures is tie the person's head to a thick leather strap. And then they would twist it. They would twist it. They had machines like in medieval times in Europe and Renaissance and Spanish Inquisition time. So they had done a lot of things to perfect torture, but this is how it feels for the person. It's excruciating. Bhante, my situation is unbearable and I'm not doing well at all. My pain is increasing and intensifying. The pain is not nearing its end, as it is still strong and persisting. Bhante, the pain I am experiencing is so severe that it feels just as if a skilled butcher or his apprentice were to cut open my gut with his meat cleaver. In the same way, Bhante, my gut feels like it is being cut open by the dry and violent internal winds. Bhante, I can't bear the pain. So the mind, when there's that much pain and the person is it's unbearable, inevitably it will affect the mind, the quality of the mind. And that's one of the reasons why we all ask any person, especially someone who's very old or is very, very sick. They say, I just want to die in peace, in my sleep, comfortably. Why? Because we don't want to experience pain. And sometimes people think that because bhikkhus should not feel pain. Sometimes people are surprised when I say Lord Buddha suffered a lot physical pain before he died. They say, well, he was the Buddha, how could he suffer? Because he had a body. That's why he suffered. Now, the question is, did it affect his mind? The answer is no. Because again and again, you see the references to the two arrows. One arrow is the arrow of ignorance. The other is the arrow of being born in this body. The first of these two arrows is why we have the Dhamma. That arrow we can get rid of. That's the poisonous arrow of ignorance. But the other arrow, the arrow of having a body, which means everything that comes along with it, that we must suffer because we were born, plain and simple. So the Dhamma is not our escape from physical pain. This is sometimes I see in people's mind that they want to practice meditation so they can just somehow jump over the pain hurdle. Now, of course, you could get to a point of upekkha, equanimity, or specifically the jhanas, where you can cut the sensations of the body. You can cut it. The body can go through that, but you are in a trance-like state. That's an absorption concentration, which means a pure jhana. If the pain is intense, and you decide when you want to come out of it. But the physical pain, it will be there. Even for an arahat, as Lord Buddha. Bhante, my situation is unbearable and I'm not doing well at all. My pain is increasing and intensifying. The pain is not nearing its end, as it is still strong and persisting. Bhante, the pain I am experiencing is so severe that it feels just as if two strong men had grabbed hold of a weaker person by his limbs and start roasting and grilling him over a pit of burning charcoal. In the same way, Bhante, my body is burning with hot fever. Bhante, I can't bear the pain. So he has severe, excruciating headache. He has extreme belly ache, body ache, torso. And now we also understand that he has fever. If Dr. Sue was here, we could have asked her, what does she think the diagnosis is? Not to belittle the Venerable One's sickness, but just out of curiosity, could there be, he might have been infected or just old age, maybe. Bhante, my situation is unbearable and I'm not doing well at all. My pain is increasing and intensifying. The pain is not nearing its end, as it is still strong and persisting. Now, sometimes people will ask, well, did these words actually, were they spoken this many times? We have to understand that for at least 400, 450, 500 years, if not more, these words were not written down. They were carried through the word of mouth, through repetition. A teacher would speak it out loud, and the students, especially they're called memory monks, they would sit down and they would memorize the words, the suttas. So when you use certain words in a certain way, you have to change the words so they can turn into mnemonic devices, easy to remember kind of statements. But the essence of the teaching must be there. So when we are hearing these, they have several functions to serve. One is to put us face to face with the reality that there's dukkha. Second, obviously to save this resource, this teaching, through the centuries. When you think about it, Venerable Nyanananda would say, it's like passing a very valuable jewel in the dark from one person to the next, and you don't know where the other person is. So it might slip through your fingers. That's what happened, because they didn't have cameras, they didn't have audio recording devices. And sometimes there were tragedies, famines, wars, battles, destructions of temples. Somehow we still managed to have the suttas 2,600 years ago. And sometimes we can't even find our t-shirt where we put it in the house. Then the Blessed One encouragingly spoke as he inspired, roused, and lightened Venerable Phagguna's heart with an enlivening talk on the Dhamma. And then he rose from his seat and left. Soon after the Blessed One had left, the Venerable Phagguna died. But as he was dying, his faculties suddenly became bright and clear at the moment of his death. His faculties, his appearance, his mind, his eyes, his hearing suddenly cleared up, brightened, which is extremely important at the moment of death, to have a clear mind. That is the moment for which we are preparing throughout life. I don't care how long you live, how many PhDs you might have, what type of experiences you might have, titles, all that must serve one thing, that moment of our exit. That's what we're preparing for. Not the owning of the houses, the businesses, the titles, the degrees, how many children you have, what type of relationships you have with them. None. How you are treated by others. None of those things matter at that moment. The mind has to be in a calm, unagitated, open, smiling state. That's why I insist for you to practice metta, at least for yourself. We don't know when we're going to go. When we are going to go, we don't know. No one knows that. Then the Venerable Ananda approached the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, sat to one side and said, Bhante, soon after the Blessed One had left, the Venerable Phagguna died. But as he was dying, his faculties suddenly became bright and clear. This tells us that they went together. Remember, Venerable Ananda was the one who said, Bhante, Venerable Phagguna is sick. So they went together. But we also know from the text that Lord Buddha left before he died. So that means that Venerable Ananda stayed a little bit longer until he passed away. He died. So he's reporting on this. So his complexion, his faculties were bright and clear, Bhante, he says. Ananda, this is Lord Buddha responding, why shouldn't Phagguna Bhikkhu's faculties not become bright and clear? For even though Phagguna Bhikkhu's mind was not yet released from the 5 lower fetters that bound him to the sensual world, on listening to the Dhamma, right at that moment, his mind was released from the lower fetters that bound him to the sensual world. Please do not underestimate that moment, because you know that this is it. All the troubles you went through, all the dramas, all the scenarios, all the ups and downs and the valleys and the peaks mean nothing. This means everything. So you really become attentive. And Venerable Phagguna was very attentive, because he listened to the Dhamma that Lord Buddha had gone to teach him at that moment, because he was in so much pain. A person who's drowning in the sea, and you happen to be on a ship about to throw him or her that raft, the life-saving buoy, something to float and something to pull him with, do you think they're not going to be attentive? Their life is dependent on it, because they don't know how to swim or they're drowning. And you're saying, pay attention, I'm about to throw you this life-saving mechanism. They're not going to say, oh, look at the blue sky over there. Oh, look at the seagulls. Yes, yes, yes. They're not going to do that. They're like, Yes, I'm here. Throw it. Even if a shark comes and tries to bite them, they're still looking at that while fighting off the shark. That intention to stay with what is being spoken is what I try to say again and again in every single Dhamma talk. Because people still take it lightly. So many countless people attained Sotapatti, Sakadagami stage, Anagami, and even Arahantship simply by listening to Lord Buddha's teaching or any of his students. When they were listening to the Dhamma, they were available. Venerable Phagguṇa Tero was available, and he relinquished his attachment to the 5 lower fetters. Now, what that means is he became an Anagami. I've mentioned this before, but I'll go over it again. The 5 lower fetters are, the first one, the idea, not just the idea, but the belief, the conviction that I am separate than everyone else, that I have a soul that is unchanging. Atta, we call it in the Dhamma. Atta, or in Sanskrit, it's Atman. The soul, this uniqueness in me, something that goes from life to life, unchanging, independent from other things. Myself. That belief is gone. That's the first fetter, Sangyojana. The second one depends on how you look at it, but basically, rites and rituals, belief in pujas to be the things that they could save you, that they can get you to liberation, to nibbana. How many times you could prostrate, how many times you can chant, mantras, this, that, rites and rituals, how you approach how you sit down, as I was mentioning about the sitting position, like higher, lower, some people really take that too seriously. So a person whose that fetter is dropping, they laugh at rites and rituals. They laugh at it because they realize that it is never going to take them to Nibbana following the rites and rituals. And the third fetter is having the doubt that this path could ever lead you to Nibbana. So that doubt drops. Vichikicca. Skeptical doubt disappears. For you, it is impossible from now on, from that moment on, to go and listen to other teachings different than the Dhamma. It's impossible. It's like you've gone to the movies for you. It's like, yeah, sure, whatever. You'll do it as a favor, but it's like you laugh because you know the truth. Like somebody telling you that gravity doesn't exist. It's as ridiculous as that. And then there's the fourth fetter, which has to do with lusting after things, craving things, being lost in attachment to things, sensuality in things. That drops. Also drops the hatred towards things, the vyapada. Holding a grudge drops. The person comes and tries to make you angry, does some terrible things. You might look inside your heart and say, I have to be angry at this person. This is really low what they did. Like, why am I not angry at this person? Because you dropped that fetter as well. And that's why such a person cuts the connection to all the kama lokas, all the levels of deva realms that deal with sensuality. And that's why they are reborn when they die, if they're not arahants yet, into the pure abodes that is only reserved for anagamis. Only those beings who have relinquished the 5 lower fetters can be reborn there. So that's what we understand from Lord Buddha saying the 5 lower fetters that bound the person to sensual world is gone. Ananda, there are these 6 benefits of listening to the Dhamma at the correct time. See, remember the 6? This is the book of the 6s. So he's about to tell us 6 benefits. While investigating its meaning at the correct time, what are these 6? Now remember, when you are listening to the Dhamma, that does not mean doing calculations or working like Rubik's Cube in your head. You know, okay, I hear this, okay, so what does that mean? Does that mean, does that agree with this idea, with this conviction, with this interpretation from this teacher? None of that. You put all those things aside. You're simply available to what is being said. That is crucial. Yeah, but, that's what a lot of people do. Yeah, but. Even in interviews, sometimes I say, stop with the yeah, buts. Enough. Here, Ananda, the bhikkhu's mind is not yet released from the 5 lower fetters, binding him to the sensual world. At the time of his death, he gets the opportunity to see the Tathagata, like Venerable Phagguṇa. He must have had some wonderful merits to be born at the time of Buddha, when there is a teaching. And on top of that, on his sick bed, the Tathagata himself shows up, visits him. And that, not only that, teaches him. The Tathagata then teaches him the Dhamma that is beautiful in its beginning, beautiful at its middle, and beautiful in its end, full of meaning and balanced in its expression and phrasing, while declaring and revealing to him the completeness and purity of the holy life. Now, on hearing and listening to the Dhamma, his mind is released from the 5 lower fetters, binding him to the sensual world. He does not sit and analyze, okay, so how should this work with my doubt towards the triple gem or the Dhamma? No. If you've ever been in love, love is not going to be the product of analysis. You can't do a pros and cons list with love. You have to be available to see it, to feel it, to experience it. You cannot logically try to make sense of love. If you're trying, guess what? It's like a botanist trying to understand the beauty of a rose by tearing it into pieces. It won't work. So this is how I understand when we're listening to Lord Buddha's Dhamma. You have to be available. Keep your logical thinking, analytical mind outside, as far as possible, away from the Dhamma hall. So you can absorb whatever is being offered. So his mind is released from the 5 lower fetters, binding him to the sensual world. Ananda, this is the first benefit of listening to the Dhamma at the correct time. Emphasis on correct time. Timing is very important. Hence, mindfulness is necessary for us to identify when to say what and when to listen. Again, Ananda, the bhikkhu's mind is not yet released from the 5, this is the second example, from the 5 lower fetters, binding him to the sensual world. At the time of his death, he does not get the opportunity to see the Tathagata. In this case, no chance of him seeing the Tathagata. But prior to his death, he does see a disciple of the Tathagata who teaches him the Dhamma that is beautiful in its beginning, beautiful at its middle, and beautiful in its end, full of meaning and balanced in its expression and phrasing, while declaring and revealing to him the completeness and purity of the holy life. Now, on hearing and listening to the Dhamma, his mind is released from the 5 lower fetters, binding him to the sensual world. Ananda, this is the second benefit of listening to the Dhamma at the correct time. So you don't get a chance to see the Tathagata, but in this case, he's seeing as a disciple of his. Again, Ananda, third example, the bhikkhu's mind is not yet released from the 5 lower fetters, binding him to the sensual world. At the time of his death, he does not get the opportunity to see the Tathagata, nor does he see a disciple of the Tathagata. But he carefully examines, scrutinizes, ponders, and investigates whatever he has already heard and learned of the Dhamma. Even though there's no visitors, but he's using this time to process what he has learned from the Dhamma. That's one of the reasons why I really like for you. I seen some of you were taking notes these past 3 days. Don't leave them in the notebook. Go over them, process them. And if you have Kalyana Mittas, if you have spiritual friends to speak with, go ahead and speak with them, share with them what you think about this term. We heard this from Bhante, we heard this, and he mentioned in the sutta. Let's go and look at the sutta. Let's share some ideas. What do you think? This and that. That helps you to ground you, to create an island in this mess of chaos that we're living in. So you can understand the real reason why you seek happiness. It's comfort. Now, as he continues doing so, his mind is released from the 5 lower fetters binding him to the sensual world. Ananda, this is the third benefit of listening to the Dhamma at the correct time. People to this day believe that if you want to attain Nibbana or Nirvana, you must have been born at the time of Lord Buddha. Sorry, you're about 2,600 years late. That is a defeatist way of thinking. When you go and probe people's mind, you scratch the surface. So many times I see this mentality that, yeah, but Bhante, it doesn't happen anymore. How do you know? How do you know? People are giving up. People give up. And oftentimes this starts with the bhikkhus. I'm shaking my finger at the bhikkhus now. The teachers, the guardians of the Dhamma. Why? Because we have lost the sense of samvega. Urgency must be there. That's why if a teacher sees you bowing and doing pujas after pujas, they have to come and shake you and say, what are you doing? Where's your urgency? That's number one objective of bhikkhus. Not building a bigger temple, making more money. Urgency is what Lord Buddha taught. Number one. Urgency, samvega. And there's nothing that drags you into the middle of the hurricane of urgency than death. Death really shakes us up. And that's what Lord Buddha is saying. But so long as we don't have the urgency, you're very lackadaisical. You're like, yeah, I'll do it next year. We'll go retreats twice a year, 3 times, 10 times a year. Yeah, I'm just going through the routine. Nothing's changing. No personality change is taking place. Something is wrong. Your approach is wrong. Not the technique. Lord Buddha's techniques have no problem with them. The Satipatthana is perfect. It is us. I can sit down and write a book on Satipatthana. People write it all the time. That doesn't mean anything. I have to taste the fruits of it. Not just one person, people. So demand that the teacher teaches you urgency. You have to go to the bhikkhu and say, Bhante, Ajahn, Sayadaw, I need to become a Sotapanna, at the very least. In ancient China, you would pay the doctor so long as you were healthy. But if you got sick, that means the doctor failed. You stop paying and he has to treat you. What a beautiful arrangement. Talk about pressure on the doctor. They have to do their job. Today it's the opposite, by the way. The same thing with bhikkhus. Why? You must demand something from the bhikkhus. Their job, our job, is to make sure that there are Sotapannas, Sakadagamis, Anagamis, and Arahants. Period. At the very least, they must go into the laboratory of their own life and turn themselves into such beings and then teach them to others. That's why we become bhikkhus. Period. Not just bhikkhus, nuns as well. Otherwise, this Dhamma, again and again, I keep repeating, will die in less than 50 years. Further on under, the bhikkhu's mind is released from the 5 lower fetters, binding him to the sensual world, but not yet released from the underlying defilements in the heart. These are the kilesas. Lobha, dosa, moha. Those are the things that cover the heart. Those are the things that don't allow us to see the Dhamma. Even if you have love for the Dhamma, the teachings, the truth, change the name of the Dhamma into truth. This is the same thing. Purity of the heart is camouflaged by these 3. That's why people say, I don't know what happened. I don't know what got into me and I said those words, or I felt so terrible, or this or that. Those are the kileshas at work. It happened to everyone, whoever's not an arahant yet. Through the unsurpassed destruction of all attachments, they are not yet released. But at the time of his death, he gets the opportunity to see the Tathagata. The Tathagata then teaches him the Dhamma that is beautiful in its beginning, beautiful at its middle, and beautiful in its end, full of meaning and balanced in its expression and phrasing, while declaring and revealing to him the completeness and purity of the holy life. Now, on hearing and listening to the Dhamma, his mind is released from the underlying defilements in the heart through the destruction of attachments. Ananda, this is the 4th benefit of listening to the Dhamma at the correct time. In this case, what we're talking about is a person who becomes an arahant at the moment of death. This is what happened to King Suddhodana, the Buddha's father, Prince Siddhartha's father. He was already a Sotapanna. So he had jnana darsana of the Dhamma. But as he was aging, and the news got to Lord Buddha that your father is dying. So he gathered his closest disciples, and they went. And they spent about a week in King Suddhodana's palace, his old home. And every single day, Lord Buddha sat at the side of his father's bed. They were there first, the bhikkhus, but they say he didn't leave the side of his father. He knew that he was ready. He just had to be taught the right things. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a chance or a random thing that he had been the father of Siddhartha, It takes tremendous, tremendous merits to be in that position of a father to a future Buddha. Same thing with Queen Mahamaya. So, Lord Buddha teaches him the Dhamma again, slowly, gradually, until his father's kileshas, he becomes an arahant right before death. Right before his death. So this, Lord Buddha says, is the 4th benefit of listening to the Dhamma. So please do not underestimate the power of listening. In the Anguttara Nikaya, in the Book of the Fives, you see Lord Buddha listing the 5 ways that a person becomes awakened, experiences Nibbana. One of them is listening. But how? When I was apprenticing to be a goldsmith, the person teaching me, the master, my mind as a teenager, I was barely 12. I would look, but as a teenager, young teenager, 12, 13 years old, your mind is going to drift away. You're looking at the fire, this, that, as he's soldering the ring or this and working with the gold. And he would say, hey, over here, attention. Pay attention because I'm working with fire. I don't want you to burn yourself when you're working with fire. I'm working with sharp objects. I'm using a hammer. I'm using a drill. You're going to drill your finger otherwise if you don't pay attention. Paying attention is what I'm talking about. For mundane things like that, we pay 100% attention. But when it comes to the Dhamma, we just sit and like a chair. So, again, Ananda, the bhikkhu's mind is released from the 5 lower fetters binding him to the sensual world, but not yet released from the underlying defilements in the heart. Through the unsurpassed destruction of all attachments at the time of his death, he does not get the opportunity to see the Tathagata. But prior to his death, he does see a disciple of the Tathagata who teaches him the Dhamma, and that is beautiful in its beginning, beautiful at its middle, and beautiful in its end, full of meaning and balanced in its expression and phrasing, while declaring and revealing to him the completeness and purity of the holy life. Now, on hearing and listening to the Dhamma, his mind is released from the underlying defilements in the heart through the destruction of attachments. Ananda, this is the 5th benefit of listening to the Dhamma at the correct time. So in this case, the person also loses all the kileshas in one's heart, but not because the Tathagata teaches him, but a student of the Tathagata. I know of someone who attained Sotapatti, stream entry, stream winning, simply by listening to the Dhamma. I know them. In the 21st century. I know their name. But we think that these things don't happen. One time I was in pilgrimage in India, and I was accompanied by some people who were meditators. I went there not as a tourist. I was going and sitting in all of these precious sacred places to meditate, sometimes for days in the same place. And what some of these individuals were doing were also a lovely idea. They were reading the suttas as we were going in the bus to kind of be very inspiring. You know, you look forward to the destination. You're going to Rajagaha. So it's like there's a sutta. And Lord Buddha sitting there in Rajagaha, this teaching. And then at the end, there's a group of people, through listening to Lord Buddha give a Dhamma talk, they become stream winners, they become once returners, they become non-returners, and they become arahants. When he got the person who was reading, I still remember I was in the bus. When he got to that point and he said, yeah, you know what is, that doesn't happen now. This was a meditator for at least 30 years who claimed to be a student of the Dhamma, who had followers with him, who was reading the sutta, and he had zero faith, zero saddha. In fact, he was also discouraging others to even ponder the possibility that we too, in listening to the Dhamma, we can also be free from the kilesas. What is that? That is wrong, whichever way you cut it. We don't read the suttas for entertainment, you know. These are not fairy tales. These are not novels, fiction novels. These are real. But we allow them to stay fiction in our lives or not. I try to use examples that I've lived through to help you, if I could, to kind of put you in the dire situation, to really appreciate the situation we're in. And it is really not good for the sasana if we perpetuate. But you don't go and fight someone. No one out there is our enemy. No one. The enemy is always here, nowhere else. No matter what they say, no matter what they do, no matter how they accuse you, what they accuse you of, it's not They're not the enemy. Here's the enemy, period. The toughest enemies you're going to find. And once you see that and work through the Dhamma, guess what? You will experience for yourself what Lord Buddha teaches again and again. So it's a personal journey. It's a personal experiencing. Again, Ananda, the bhikkhu's mind is released from the 5 lower fetters binding him to the sensual world. By the way, again, sensual world, why is it important? Because it is the sensual world. If you leave the human realm, if you've tasted any of the sense pleasures on this realm, in this realm, and if I ask you what was the greatest thing, let's say, the greatest physical, tactile, sensual experience, you probably will be able to remember it. If I ask you what was the most tastiest thing you tasted, you probably will be able to remember it. The sight, the ear, the sound you heard. All those cannot compare to the next level of Deva realm and the sensuality that is waiting for you if you're reborn there. And as you go higher and higher, and if you reach the Tavatimsa heaven, the 33, it is unimaginable. Flavors that your brain cannot handle. How beautiful they are. The sensual world is a big trap. It's very, very difficult for someone being reborn in a Deva realm to still appreciate dukkha, to still appreciate difficulties in life, to shake them off and to make them want to practice. Pain allows us to practice, you know. How many people do you know who are rich, celebrity, really go to retreats? Not rehab, retreats. How many? King of England, who? Does he go to retreats? No. Do they sit down and meditate? No. What else? You have so many royalties, so many rich people who are richer than royalty. Celebrities. They don't. Why? Because they are too busy milking the cow that's called their life. Because they are simply feeding themselves on the food that was prepared by them yesterday. So it is stale food, as Visakha said. You're eating yesterday's food, father-in-law. You're not making new kamma now. So these are puny, these are nobodies, these rich people that you hear, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, even though they're the richest people they cannot compare. In the amount of pleasure they can extract from this life, it's nothing. It's like dirt at the feet of a deva. So how in the world will you be able to practice? That's one of the reasons. That's one of the stumbling blocks to be reborn in the heavenly realm. Meanwhile, you have entire religions that teach that. Do good so you can be reborn in heaven, including Buddhists, which is terrible. So Lord Buddha was saying here, cut the connection to the sensual world. Otherwise, you're stuck, because in the next life, you might be there for a long time in a Deva realm, enough time for you to spend in delusion, chasing after this Deva and that Deva and doing this and that. Time passes very fast, and those billions of years will soon come to an end. And you're going to open up your eyes coming out of a womb, some type of a womb, a mother's womb, maybe even a worm or an amoeba in the mud. And even if you're there at the feet of a Buddha, which is very, very rare, you still will not be able to understand the Dhamma that is being taught. A wasted life, and a life, and a life, and a life. Long chain. It took you so long to come to be inhabiting these bodies, and now to come to hear the Dhamma. So much work you have done to come to this. Please don't take it lightly. This is precious. Not the amount of pleasures you extract from this body, this life. No. You being present in this body and listening to the Dhamma, that is precious. And you still have time. Because the Dhamma, we still have it. A little bit of it still is there. Authentic Dhamma. At the time of his death, he does not get the opportunity to see the Tathagata, nor does he see a disciple of the Tathagata. But he carefully examines, scrutinizes, ponders, and investigates whatever he has already heard and learned of the Dhamma. Now, as he continues doing so, his mind is released from the underlying defilements in the heart through the destruction of attachments. Ananda, this is the sixth benefit of listening to the Dhamma at the correct time. Ananda, these are the six benefits of listening to the Dhamma at the correct time, while investigating its meaning at the correct time. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I hope this was helpful in at least bringing up a sense of urgency into our lives. An image that helps to bring up urgency is imagine your hair on fire or your clothes on fire. Do you delay? Hold on, I have to answer this text. You run, you break through those glass doors. You crawl out of these doors to simply find a body of water to throw yourself into. This body. But somehow, when it comes to the lives that we have, many of us will be slaughtered as animals in time after this life is gone, including the merits when they run out. Eventually, billions of years later, they run out, you know. The merits will run out. They do. Lord Buddha was urging us to end the cycle of samsara. He would repeatedly, again and again, urge the students, the bhikkhus, not just the bhikkhus actually, lay people as well. The least level of awakening I expect from you is a sotapanna. Nothing less. Why? Because sooner or later we will turn into that goat, that cow, that sheep, that shrimp, that ant, or that human being who's somewhere in the world being slaughtered, being kidnapped, tortured. You know, there are people right now being tortured. They're not going to announce it on CNN, you know. So much dreadful things are happening to people. And not just people, animals. Countless animals. Chickens, they're slaughtering chickens, burning them. I'm not saying this to terrify you. The Dhamma is not trying to terrify anyone. It's just putting us face to face with the facts. Whether you believe in rebirth or not, it makes no difference, because tomorrow morning you wake up and guess what? That is a new birth for you. Including every breath you take. Every inhale, it's a new birth. Every inhale is a new birth. If you approach this, you realize that you've changed so much during the day. And no, you don't have to go and get a PhD in the Dhamma. You don't have to go every week to listen to a Dhamma talk. No. Take a little bit of it. That's why in the Dhammapada we have a verse, right? It says, even a little bit of the sacred text, if you could remember and apply, it can change your life. Otherwise, reading all the texts, all the sacred texts, and thinking that you're doing something is like you're just counting someone else's cows. The cowherd who counts others' cows. Waste. What a waste. So let's really treat the life that we're living precious. Not the gold, not the diamond, not the properties. None of those things are yours. They will be taken from you. You're not even going to... I was telling this to my sister some time ago. I said, you're not even going to be able to take with you your own name, let alone the money that you're making. Your name will not be taken with you. Your gender, your hair, your eye color. None of it, except your intentional actions and how you close your eyes the last time. So I will stop here and see if there's any questions and comments. Yes, John.
Question.
I will repeat your question because I don't think they can hear, but go ahead. Mm, mm, mm,
So, but
mm, mm. Yes. So thank you. So the question is, uh, Joe's asking, in the suttas, as far as the woeful planes, the miserable planes of existence, those that are below human realm, there in many suttas they are listed as three. But later, other sources, not necessarily the suttas, we have a fourth one added, which is the Asura realm, which usually in English is translated as demons or demonic realm. It is not throughout the suttas that you only have the three. In the earliest suttas, like the Sutta Nipata and other places, you have the three, yes. The earliest parts of the Sasana, days of the Sasana, you had the teaching of the three realms. But in other suttas, later suttas, you have the fourth one added. So again, some people are very, they have a, I won't say puritanical, but they have a more scrutinizing approach. Some of the teachers. I know that the late Venerable Dhamma, he would stick to the three realms. Of course, I respect his position. He was one of the great teachers of the 20th and 21st century, late 20th, because he brought the attention of people back to the suttas. And he was neglected. He was not supported for the longest time. Only in his later years. And he was from Malaysia, and he was a good bhikkhu, knowledgeable bhikkhu, a true bhikkhu, but people did not give him that respect that he deserved. So when he speaks, even now, thankfully, we have the YouTube videos. So we have to approach his teaching with so much respect and love and veneration. But in answer to your question directly, how I would approach it, when you look at anything that came after, always be scrutinizing of that. Okay? Meaning the commentaries. Because over time, wherever Buddhism, the Dhamma spread, it had to take some of the coloration, the flavors of those cultures and those ways of doing things. That's why eventually what you ended up having was even the places where bhikkhus were gathered, or what turned into a vihara, a temple, sooner or later it also included statues of devas, deities, that now people had to go and make offerings, because many of the people who came had already their own cosmology, their own interpretation of how the world functions. So you couldn't separate those from the person. So, and especially if you want to attract them, you need to include some of those elements into this new religion that you're inviting them to. You see this everywhere in every religion. Most of the rites and rituals of Christianity has a lot of paganism in it. And then we just accept them now as Christian. The same thing with other religions. So you had some of these Brahmanic things and cosmologies also penetrating into the cosmology of Buddhists. But do I think that these are important? Ultimately, no, because we should not even be interested in the lower realms, except for what I really appreciate and really want focus to be given to, obviously, is the hell realms, because they exist, they are there. It's not a metaphor. It's pretty bad, and the animal realm, of course, because we can see them. They're there. You can see insects. You can see dogs. You can see some dogs that are trying to chew their skin off because they're itching, because they have certain diseases. You're seeing a combination of hell and animal realm in front of you, because the animal is suffering, is in torture, but they can't do anything about it. And then especially there's the hungry ghost realm. This is the realm where there is really very bad state of affairs, because you have beings who are suffering and they cannot do anything about it. But many of them have lost their loved ones through the centuries. Loved ones who remembered them up until they were alive. And then when they died, their branch of lineage of families wiped out. So who's going to offer them food? Who's going to offer them prayers? And that's why they drift for centuries, for thousands of years. So Lord Buddha, I think it was the Phagguṇa Sutta, I think also from the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Tens, if I'm not mistaken, Lord Buddha says, because Phagguṇa is asking, where do these merits go? Last year I covered it in one of the Dhamma talks on the suttas. So Lord Buddha narrows it down to the Peta realm. He says the best beings who are in the receptive mode of your offerings are the ghosts, are the spirits that are suffering, because they will benefit. Because the devas are in so much pleasure, they really don't need your merits, you know. They are in a much better state than you and I. Humans, you cannot send them much merits, because they're born, the loved ones, they are already reborn in other parts of this world and other galaxies as beings you can identify as people. So they're not going to benefit. A dog, if they're born there, they're not going to benefit unless you're helping a dog or your dog right there. So that leaves only the Petas in a receptive, like a sponge. They're waiting for good things. That's why whenever you're offering food, you're offering some kind words. Even when you're bowing to someone you respect, the merits to be gained from that, share it with the Petas. They're not scary. They just are without substance, but they are definitely suffering, and they don't die until they transform. They move up. And they move up when you send them metta. By the way, metta really gets absorbed by them. The darkness turns into light. They become embodiments of metta. They're in so much pain. And they're not to be scared of. So whenever you can, just give them. Yes. Yes. And sadly enough, they are near garbage cans. They're near trash cans. They're near piles of garbage where there's animal poop. There's a cremation ground. They go because they cannot eat. Traditionally, they would be represented as having huge bellies with a very, very, very small mouth. In fact, so small, it's smaller than this. In fact, it's smaller than the pinhead. And they have a huge belly. They cannot even drink a drop of water. It doesn't go through. And that comes, and probably that's going to be the second question, as to how they end up. Greed, miserliness, stinginess. This is mine. I worked for this. This is mine. I'll share it with whomever. That drive. I'm going to leave this to my children and my children only, and only the good ones. Greed. You see, I named names. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, King of England, these people, and all the other powers that be today. So much wealth, so much wealth. How much are they spending? Are they even giving an actual $1, €1 out of their own pocket to someone? A meal? Are they giving to a bottle of water? That's why their next destination, most probably, is one of those, not probably, actually, for sure, it's going to be one of those realms. I'm not sure if it's going to be the Beta realm. Chances are it will be further down the elevator. Lower, lower, lower. Hell realm, Lord Buddha says, as if deposited there. They close their eyes, they die, they will be taken there as if deposited there. The next time they open their eyes, it will be hell, and there's no way they're going to come out. And you cannot, by the way, in case you're wondering, you cannot send merits, you cannot transfer or share merits with beings in the hell realms. It's impossible, Lord Buddha says. And John Usoni asks one last question, which I'm glad that he asked, because people would wonder about this. I would wonder about this. So I'm very appreciative of him asking this. He said, Bhante, could there come a time when these realms would ever be emptied out? Ever in the future? He says, no. In a way, it was heart-wrenching to realize that these realms will always be occupied. Why? The answer is because people will have greed, lust, and delusion. One of the ways to take you to the lowest of realms is lying, by the way. Cheating in different ways. If you do things in an unconscious way, irresponsible way, and just with asati, the opposite of sati, that will land you in the animal realms, usually, unless you incorporated a lot of lying and cheating and stealing or greed. Typically, that is the mechanism that you could use to kind of narrow down the average or possibility of where should a person go, would a person go. So if the person has greed, the attractive place for them would be the ghost realm. So if they are prone to killing and lying, stealing, their realm would be the hell realms. And if they're prone to moha, living in a stupidly, basically, choosing to be like, I know people who don't care about meditation, who never come to talks. I have friends or relatives who've never attended a single Dhamma talk that I've given. And I've been giving Dhamma talks for many, many, many years, even before I became a monk. Not a single time. Hopefully they're listening to some talk somewhere, some reading something. I don't care where, just some Dhamma. But they choose not to because that's not their world. They'd rather go to Las Vegas. For such a person, the animal realm. Because there's ignorance. Because a dog can sit next to the Buddha and Lord Buddha would teach the Noble Eightfold Path. It's a dog. The most the dog is going to do is do kind things, help guide the monk at night, or keep away a vicious animal. That's also gaining merits. The dog can gain merits. Animals can gain merits, by the way. So I don't want to. So I hope I answered some part of your question. Yes. Yes. Permanently. And when you do become a Sotapanna, you have permanently erased the possibility of ever dropping below a human realm. That's why I would very much like you to become a Sotapanna, Joe, and everyone else. And is it possible? Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, by the way, the last portion of the question was, So it doesn't matter whether there are 3 realms or 4 realms or 10, because I've also read in some commentaries where they said there's 11 cold, frozen hells and 10 or 11 burning realms. In the Digha Nikaya, you have very powerful descriptions of hell realms. And that's from the suttas. That's not commentary. And it's really, shocking to read, but it's there. But it's good to be shocked in this desensitized world that we're living in. There's one question here, I think, from the Zoom class. Oh, thank you, Bante. So, okay, so if there are no, oh, there's one question. Yes. Yeah. With the suttas. Where would you recommend one starting? Can I? The question was from Brother Tipi, with suttas being so important, an integral part of the training and understanding of the Dhamma, where should one start from? Which sutta? Because it's a vast, even though it's nicely organized, but it is vast. I recommend the Dhammapada, because these are short sayings of Lord Buddha, but there is the version that was prepared beautifully by the late chief at Brickfield's temple. It's a wonderful version of the Dhammapada I found. Unfortunately, there aren't that many available anymore, but what I did was, years ago, I narrated it so people could have it with just hitting play. So it's on YouTube. But if you can find the book, I've had some students obtain it somehow, so I think they had some of it on Amazon, even though these books are for free distribution. However, somebody has it, they want to sell it, bad karma for them. But I say this version is better than others that I've come across, because other than the beautiful graphics, some of these verses have graphics, illustrations, but almost every one of these sections of sayings has a background story. So it puts it in a context. So there's a beautiful story behind what got Lord Buddha to say these words, because every time Lord Buddha gave a talk, usually it was prompted. Someone had to say, Bhante, could you please speak to us Dhamma, give us Dhamma, or a question would arise. Someone would come and ask a question. But usually you didn't have Lord Buddha just like that saying things, teaching. In the case of the Dhammapada, he was in a position where he saw something happen, and he felt the need to express something. Like we say in the mornings, he abused me, he beat me, he hit me, he robbed me. For those who keep saying those things in their mind, hatred is never appeased. Where is that from? That's from the Dhammapada. But when did he say that? There's a story behind it. It was in Kosambi, because you had 2 groups of bhikkhus. One was the Vinaya group, who was sticking to the rites and rituals and saying, how dare you don't turn the bucket after using the toilet. Oh, you left a little bit of water in the bucket. What kind of a bhikkhu are you? You don't practice the Vinaya. The other, who was, they weren't so obsessed about the Vinaya. They knew the Vinaya, but they didn't make a big deal. Suddenly there was a fight, to the point where Lord Buddha goes and says, what's going on? The Sangha is being torn apart. Bhikkhus, come to your senses. And they turn to Lord Buddha, their teacher, the reason why they are bhikkhus in the first place. And they say, old man, just go and do your thing. It's okay, Bante, just go and rest. We'll handle this. We'll handle this. 3 times. To the point where, it's how insulting that is? And Lord Buddha goes quietly to his kuti, puts everything in order, closes the door, and turns around, and he's about to walk out of the vihara from Kosambi, and he says those words. So that's all recorded. I've narrated the whole thing, and so you could start from there. However, and I have one student who listened to the whole thing while they used to travel back and forth in Los Angeles to go to the university and come back. So they listened to the whole thing, and also the Majjhima Nikaya, that's also recorded. And so you could start, but if you're a type of a person who likes to read, you can start by that or Dhammapada, or also the Udana and Itivuttaka. Udana and Itivuttaka, those are shorter suttas. They don't have necessarily a John D. Ireland, he's the author. It's relatively a good translation. John Ireland, John D. Ireland, like the country Ireland. And these 3 that I mentioned, they are part of the Khuddaka Nikaya. Currently, I'm doing the translation of the entire Sutta Nipata, which is one of the earliest books. Once it's done, it will be PDF, and we're going to have to try to print that for free. So I hope that answers your question. Yes. Yes. Which sutta to go? To go last. Ooh. Which ones have you covered so far? The 10 questions. So you're saying your preferences don't include suttas that talk about 31 realms because you don't feel like, man, it's not me. Well, you didn't understand English either at one point. But you strove, you put the effort, and we're communicating in English. You've been around the world thanks to the usage of English, which didn't come easy as a child. But that's what we learned. So what I'm saying is putting the time. The mechanism with which you're trying to approach the subject of rebirth, or kamma, or the 31 realms of existence, the approach that you have is wrong, because you're trying to understand it through linear fashion, through logic. It's like trying to understand a person who knows Chinese literature and the grammar, and applying that grammar to understand Arabic literature. Night and day, completely different. But you're saying, but that's what I know. Okay, that's wonderful that you know that. But if you're going to learn Arabic or Farsi or, I don't know, Armenian or Indonesian literature, I don't know, maybe Indonesian might be similar, but something that is totally different, you must go and start from there. That approach has to be revisited by you, because if you have faith in the teaching of Lord Buddha, then you must pause for at least a few seconds and say, why did Lord Buddha spend so many years of his life talking and putting so much value to rebirth, to kamma? This is where secular Buddhists get it completely wrong. You have a bunch of atheists who refuse so many different things. The existence of God, this, that, the other, the unseen. Meanwhile, they are believing in something, that nothing exists. That's also belief, That's a religion. But they said, Buddhism, yes, that works for us. And now they come in and they want to trim the Dhamma. So you have some teachers who have had like a few months as a monk, they become teachers. And they say, oh, Buddhism is, it's tradition. It's mumbo jumbo, karma, this, that. It was a cultural thing. Well, the Dhamma cannot be the Dhamma without rebirth and kamma in it. These are important columns that keep the teaching intact. Everything is, otherwise there's no consequence. And that's what we have today. People go ahead and do things, nothing's going to happen to me. Why? Because the moment I close my eyes, poof, darkness. That's it. They squeeze their Western philosophical schools into that. And now they force the Dhamma into that box, which is laughable. That's why there cannot be secular Buddhist. It's impossible. It's an oxymoron. It doesn't work. The late comedian, the American comedian, used to say, it's like military intelligence. Oxymoron. Doesn't work. So we have to give the Dhamma its, for us at least, the dignity it deserves. But to give you a more tangible suggestion that addresses your specific question as to where, I would highly recommend the Digha Nikaya, the long discourses. Now, the problem with the long discourses that are available, whether online or in the other English publications, and the other Nikayas too, by the way, except for the Dhammapada, is they have left so much out. I mean, so much out. They just have the ellipses, dot, 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 and then you have within parentheses or brackets, see page 64, -3b, and you go to that, and you look it up, and you see another dot, 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 bracket, refer to sutta numbers 32, usually the earlier suttas, like 12, and look at the notes in this. So now I am in like a wild goose chase looking for what Lord Buddha taught, and it's supposed to be the long discourses. What discourses? I'm seeing dot, dot, dot. They saved ink. They saved paper. For that reason, I've been spending the last 6, 7 years of my life trying to put all these together. And I've completed the Digha Nikaya. It's all there. Every single comma, dot. No footnotes. No, like, refer to page 642. No. Because this is the Dhamma. We cannot take, scholarly or academic, licenses in playing with these as we see fit. We have to approach it with so much reverence, which I don't see in today's translators. Most of whom, by the way, are monks. Some are very old monks. Some are new. But unfortunately, I don't have those in PDF, because oftentimes I would just do it on the fly, or I would have my notes, translations on the side, and I would read some section, and then I would read my section, and it was long. The Mahaparinibbana Sutta, which I translate, there's some suttas that really took a long time, months, like the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, because it is the biggest, the longest sutta. Just recording it, just the narration of it, it's over 3.5 hours. So I did a commentary of it last year, I think. And that was 7 weeks. It took 7 weeks for me to finish online. So Digha Nikaya, because it's also there that you find the Mahanidana Sutta, which is, it talks about, causation and all that. It gives you a better perspective. And so these are wonderful. They're not as many as the Majjhima Nikaya, which is 152. The Digha Nikaya is 34. But when you go to the Anguttara Nikaya, we're talking about 7,000 plus. And then you go to the Samyutta Nikaya, which is over 5,000. I haven't much touched the Samyutta. I only have like maybe 20 translations, but anyhow, I hope that is helpful for you. So you have to jump. Don't think too much. When I wanted to learn how to swim, I had to jump into the pool. Granted, it wasn't the one where I couldn't, but eventually I had to go there, into deeper end. Don't worry. Lord Buddha did not teach anything that was fake, that was hearsay. That's why we have ehipassiko, one of the crucial qualifiers of the Dhamma. Even if it doesn't agree with you. Who said everything has to agree with the limited way of thinking that we have? That means we are as wise as the Lord Buddha. You have to leave room for us to grow. That's where we walk into a classroom, the professor, the teacher, we're there allowing them to fill our mind with more knowledge. I can't say, well, wait a minute, it's supposed to be 3 plus 4, that's a 7. If he says 7a, I'm having a problem. Well, that's an algebra class. It's supposed to have x, 7. The person comes, how am I going to multiply x plus y? I know how to multiply numbers. How do you multiply letters? This is wrong, so I have to leave. That's what you're doing, in essence. So you're just wanting to deal with numbers. But there's letters too. That's the fun part. So I hope that helps, maybe. Is there any more questions? No, thankfully. So let us transfer some merits to all those beings who are capable of receiving and enjoying them. Akasatha chabumata deva naga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu loka sasanam. Akasatha chabumata deva naga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata deva naga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you be well. May the blessings of the Triple Gem be with you. Wherever you are, may you have mindfulness, your compass, always with you. And don't fret, no matter what happens. No matter what happens. Have the clarity of mind in place with you. Keep your sila, keep your precepts. And no matter what happens, you're safe. Just don't forget to smile to yourself first. Take it easy and be soft and gentle with yourself and others. Sukhi hot.